Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Jeremie Kubicek. He is the executive chairman of GiANT. It's a technology company focused on unlocking the potential of people, teams, and corporations. He's worked in a number of companies, 30 or more. He's worked in different countries. So he comes with a wealth of experience, and he has just recently transitioned from being CEO to chairman. And so want to talk a little bit about transitions with him as well today. So Jeremie, tell us and our audience, please, how did you get into doing what you're doing? And where's your focus?
Yeah, well, it's good to be with you. Thank you. And to all the listeners, I hope you enjoy the conversation and can encourage you in some way. So I'm a farm boy from Oklahoma, and when I started the journey of entrepreneurship, I actually started with a professor who taught me how to use business as a platform for good. So we moved to Russia in the early 90s, right after the Soviet Union fell apart, and basically started an economic school, started in a number of other companies with some other classmates. And it was like I caught the bug. I caught the bug of entrepreneurship. And since then, I've started 28 companies. And what I do is I pour into people. I find CEOs. I train and apprentice people under the context, which we'll get into, of 100X, getting them healthy and teaching them to multiply. And so what that's done for me is it's given me the ability to see business a little differently. I see it as a combination of strategy, the business model, the funding, the capital, and then people. And I started years ago treating people as an asset, not a liability. And I started to realize how you can get people aligned and engaged and turn on their pilot light, if you will, in their heart, like where they really get involved and get in, and the proper incentives and so forth. And so I've basically built a number of companies around that. And eventually, 20 something years ago, I started GiANT. And that was the whole goal of how do you help people come alive? How do you help them fully live into what they're best at? And over time, we bought John Maxwell's assets. We worked in, started some brands like LeaderCast, worked with people like Chick-fil-A. We worked with Google. We work with lots of companies of all types of shapes and sizes around the world, but it's all designed on unlocking the potential of people. And it probably just started from my own journey, to be honest. I learned about myself and then passed that learning on to other people.
So was John Maxwell the beginning of that? Was that the orientation of the professor that got you hooked? Or how did John Maxwell come into this arena for you?
Oh, it was just an acquisition. It was not doing well, and we basically did a turnaround. And prior to that, I'd worked in private equity, and so I was a part of a team. We bought 17 companies in 3 years, and I was a part of that roll up and that acquisition team. And I saw what happens when you don't treat people as assets, when you see them as liabilities. And what molded me was watching 70 years of communism in Russia and what that did to people, how it made them abdicating. It was like an apathy. It didn't produce engagement. And then I watched the private equity of these 17 companies, and I saw the roll up of this specific, there's some really good private equity groups, by the way, but the specific group I was with that didn't value people. They valued so they didn't get the best out of people, and people were all compliant. They weren't engaged, and that ended up harming the roll up. And so I took those two experiences and thought, well, what if you could actually liberate people? What if you could give high support and high challenge and give them opportunities to empower them? And what would happen with an empowered person who had the right incentives? And I realized most people don't do it because it's hard work. Mm-hmm. But once you figure it out, it's not as hard work, because you've now turned people on and they won't turn off. And versus, think about this. If you're a listener, how hard is it to light fires underneath people? If you're always having to light a fire underneath someone, it's so hard for you and frustrating, and it's frustrating for them too. But when you light a pilot light, you only have to light it once, usually. And that's the mentality that I started building. Started building companies around that premise, and it's been the best thing I've done.
Light a fire is a whole lot more energy than a pilot light. I think that's a powerful analogy, because we spend a lot of time in companies lighting fires and they burn out. Either we run out of the wood, the fuel, whatever, but they burn out.
And I found that the very reason that people are having to do that is because, people want to work with people they like. And if I have to follow you, but I don't want to follow you, then you're only going to get so much out of me. It's called compliance. And I'm going to be compliant because I got to keep my job. And I'm going to do just enough work to keep my job. And that's what I saw in Russia. People did just enough to not be sent to the gulag, but they were not bought in at the core to the Soviet system. And it made a profound impact on me. And I translated that into the business world with private equity. And then you start going, well, is there a better way? Yeah, engagement is much better than compliant, because engagement means you work with me, not, I'm not having to pull you.
Right. So we know from Gallup's research, 34% US, maybe less than that worldwide, are engaged of employees. The statistics coming out of post-COVID have been with those numbers a little bit further down yet. So engagement, talk a little bit about that, because that is, people are leaving over that issue. And we're hearing that depends on whose statistics you read, but it can be as high as 76% say that they're going to change jobs as soon as the dust settles. So speak to that a little bit, please.
In all my work, I really believe this. People always hear people are changing jobs. What I've found is people are changing bosses. So more than jobs. I mean, it could be if you're at a lower level and you have an opportunity for a better job, and you don't really have any encounters with leadership or bosses, maybe that's the case. But when you get to the little higher, middle or higher levels, people leave bosses, they leave people. But it's always tagged as they're leaving the company. But it's actually, I don't feel like there's an opening here. I don't feel supported. I don't feel like they're for me. So the first thing that happens with any of us is my boss for me? If I have a job, right? Are they for me? Are they against me? Or are they for themselves? And if they're for themselves, or if they're against me, I'm going to put up walls of self-preservation, and I'm going to try to make it there as long as I can. But eventually I'm going to look for other alternatives, because this is miserable and there's too many opportunities today if you're a good employee. So wanting to work for someone is a thing. And if someone is for you, you'll know if someone's for you. And if you know that someone's for you, then you can, you'll want to give your best. And I think that's a key component. A lot of people don't think about. People don't leave jobs as much as they leave people.
So very, very true. And I think we're beginning to even see that at the top level in corporations. It's CEO and board of directors, right? If there isn't alignment there, you see exiting perhaps earlier than people might have had in mind.
Absolutely. And that's a construct that we use. It's called 100X. And the idea is most leaders I've found are between 60 minus and 75 plus at best. 60 is cynical, jaded. And so then they're negative to anyone. So when you meet with them, you feel slimed. You feel like, ugh, yeah, I don't want to be with him or her or what have you. 75 plus is, yeah, hey, Lois, I'm generally good. If you need me, my door's always open. Come see me. Meaning I'm positively reactive. I'll be positive and I'll react to you if you come to me. But the best leaders are 100x. They're 90 to 100% healthy, and they've learned how to multiply. And so I have a book called The 100x Leader that Steve Cockram and I wrote. And in that, I interviewed Sherpa on Mount Everest. And I found out the best example for leadership is the Sherpa, because they have to climb. They get up before everyone else and they go climb and make sure the ropes are set. They make sure the ladders are set. Then they come back down and get everyone. And then they climb up to Camp 1. And all along the way, they're looking to see, what does that person need? Do they need more support, or do they need a little bit of challenge? But they know the persons that they're leading, so they know how to challenge them appropriately. So some people need a stiff word, and some people need a pat on the back, and some people just need a look. So a Sherpa learn how to build trust, and they learn how to get people to the next level. And so we have a phrase that we use at GiANT, it's to fight for the highest possible good of those that you lead. So to fight for the highest possible good means that you have to support them and you have to challenge them. You have to know your people to get them to the next level. And I think that it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership is. Most people think leadership is just being a climber, just go and capture, just go climb. Well, Sherpas don't just go climb. Their goal is to get you to the next level. And that's the job of a leader.
So that implies it's the people under you, right? And there's been rapid growth requires that. If you're going to rapidly grow as a company, you've got to grow those people under you. You got to know what they need. You got to motivate them. You got to challenge them, rather than just looking at where am I going and how do I preserve where I'm going. And two very different thought processes, isn't it?
It's a mindset. It's the Sherpa mindset. Basically means my job is to get us, and we have a performance indicator that we use, and like 1 through 10. How well are you doing? How good are you at performing? Just your performance. Well, I'm an 8. I'm a 9 out of 10. Okay, great. How good are you at leading performers? 1 through 10. And that's the disparity. We find that a lot of people who are leaders might be a 7, 8, 9 in performance and a 3 or a 4 in leading performers. And the complaint is you can't find good people these days. God, there's just no good people out there. And, you know, I switching metaphors, I think of like the term, think of a greenhouse and a plant. Do plants want to grow? Of course, plants want to grow. People want to grow. Good people, general people want to grow. But if you put a plant in a corner and then pull and barely give them water and then pull them out and go, plants these days, you can't get good plants anymore. Well, was it the plant or it needed a little bit of sunlight and the right amount of water? Well, so with employees. And I have had so many conversations with people going, can't you just get good people? All you have to do is hire good people. And then they'll just be a fake plant that never needs water and sunlight. Like, it's just not true. So it doesn't mean you have to coddle people. It's just the basics. And I just find that most leaders have never really thought about the mindset of being a Sherpa, they have to be healthy. Like, for instance, on the Mount Everest, no one wants to follow the asthmatic Sherpa, right? No one wants to. No. So, but we have asthmatic leaders. We have leaders that are barely healthy being put in positions of leading people, and no one really wants to follow them. And then we wonder what's going on with the organizations because they haven't focused on the team leader.
Amazing. It is so true. So let's just shift for a moment and talk a little bit about the transition you have recently gone through, going from CEO to chairman. And what has that meant for you? How did you go about that change? And what kind of transition and transformation did that require of you?
Yeah, so I'm doing, this is my next book, actually. I've written 5 books. This is the next one, and it's called, I don't have a title for it, actually. That's the funny part. But it's the idea of choosing work that best fits you. So choosing the preferred work that best fits you. And I found there's 7 different work styles, and I put them in symbols. So there's an O, those are people with jobs. An O plus is someone with a side hustle, a job with a side hustle. And then there's a line to go. Those are people who work for others. But then there's a transition. If you work for yourself, I am an XO. An X means I have a portfolio mindset. I've always worked for myself. And my O, my job would be GiANT in the case. Well, I've moved from an XO to an X, which is a portfolio. And I now have a portfolio of companies. So there's about 7 companies I'm involved in. And I'm working with the CEOs to apprentice them. And the shift to make from CEO to executive chairman is really hard, because when you understand patterns and you understand, things that you're working in, and that changes. So I figured out that, change is actually a decision. Change is I decide to sell my house. I decide to leave. Well, last August, it was a 48-hour window. I decided that I want Bronson to be the CEO of GiANT, not me. Well, that was a 48-hour decision. And over the next week, I worked with other partners and people and kind of make sure that was a good idea. But the change is a decision. After change comes transition. Transition is a season. And the season of transition it's been 1 year ago, and it's taken the full year to change my patterns, change my rhythms, change my mindset. And now I'm truly a Sherpa. I'm working off of influence. Yeah, I'm executive chairman, but I'm really trying to set up the CEOs of these different businesses for success. So that's a different mindset than just leading one organization.
So let's talk about all the things you had to change. It's a lot of change in 1 year. Some people don't weather that well. Mm-hmm. So what were those changes? How did you go about it? Did you do it sequentially? Did you do it all at the same time? What was your process?
Well, I think part of it you do intuitively. You don't realize it. Like some of it, you're intentionally going, well, I'm going to have to set up a new holding company. I'm going to, this and that. And then the others, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's what I've been doing. But I've had to change. The first thing that had to happen was changing my mindset. So I had to change the mindset of like, I'm not running the business anymore. Bronson is. I'm going to serve Bronson. So I'm going to have to. So I set up criteria for an executive chairman. I help add value to the company. I watch the CEOs blink. I take care of any stakeholder communication relationship. I'm creating content, all those things that I do. So I had to have a new job description, and I had to make sure that my job description matched the CEOs, and we talked openly about it. I then had to communicate effectively of like, hey, here's what I'm doing and here's what I'm not doing. I'm no longer going to be doing these things. I am going to be doing these things. And, the communication is hard because you're trying to figure it out. Then I started other companies and formed other businesses. And so that's its own world. Then I had to create rhythms to go, when do I meet with these people? I'm still figuring it out. Mondays are my sprint days, and I have 7 different meetings with 7 companies. It's a lot because I'm switching hats every time I'm talking to them, working on different entities and enterprises with different talent levels and different people, and some are younger and some are older. So there's a lot that goes into all of that, right? And so, to be honest, I'm probably just now figuring out what I did, as you look back versus what you think you're going to do. And then you just don't realize how much that transition takes out of you. The change, the decision to change caused a ripple effect. And then add to it COVID and working from home more than being in offices and those kinds of dynamics. My wife had to adjust to it, and so she's like, oh, you're here more. Well, that kind of messes up her world. So, we had lots of adjustments that were happening, but the transition season is really important to understand that transition is like a waiting room. It's like you go and you wait, and you're waiting for the things that you hoped were going to change happen. And sometimes you have to wait a lot longer than you thought you had to wait. And so expectation management is a massive part of any change.
So here's something I'm hearing from you, and you don't often hear it in terms of CEOs, chairman of the boards. Often that's a tenuous relationship between the two. And you have adopted your philosophy, which is to grow that leader. It shifts, in a sense, what your communication is about.
Yeah.
Is that correct or no?
100%. The idea is accretive. This was a term, a lot of M&A will use. 1 + 1 = 3. It's a financial term. 1 + 1 = 3. So I basically came to the decision, you know what? The company is going to get the best out of me, not the stress of me. I've been the CEO for 18 years of different various giant enterprises we've had. And I think it's time for me to move into a different role, and you get the best of me. So then I also get the best of Bronson. Well, Bronson plus Jeremie equals way better than just Jeremie. That's the idea, right? So I had to then, that's where there's humility. That's where there's some dying that has to happen. There's some legacy identity types of things but my confidence is I so believe in our business that, let me tell you this. Every year we did a role clarity review. We had team members shift every year. And then I'd go, am I good for another year as CEO? So I was used to this already. Well, I reached a point where like, I think Bronson would be better than me. Well, it would benefit me.
What brought you to that realization? What drove you to ask the question and answer it in a different way at that particular time?
Well, our business model had shifted. COVID had been part of it. So we shifted to a SaaS business model. So we're a technology primary business. So we make money. We certify people. So we were shifting to certification. I'm really good at content development. And I realized that to do all the content and run the company, there's a lot of stress in there. So why not let Bronson have a shot? I think Bronson's better than me. He's already been a CEO of a SaaS companies. Let's let him be the CEO of that. I'll move over to take on the content. We get the best of me and Bronson. It goes back to the value, but my incentives, SaaS companies are incentivized by revenue growth and profit, and we were profitable and growing quickly. Well, it would make sense for me. So my ego goes down to go, I'm no longer CEO. I am executive chairman. No one really cares about that, but I'm executive chairman. But it benefits me financially. It benefits me with allowing me the freedom to create the content that goes to the world. And so it's a lot less stress for me. And we share the stress load, if you will, than where I was before. So there's been lots of benefits. There's been some emotional and communication, and then you add in new companies that I'm working on as well. Then it's confusing to go, what do you do? Which is exactly why I'm writing the next book, to go, I switched from an XO to an X. And now I have a diversified portfolio of companies that I apprentice and have ownership in. And people go, oh, okay, I'm an entrepreneur, and these are the companies that I own. And it's just giving language to something that I was having my own issues with.
That's interesting. Even when you're in the process of doing it, you're in the middle of it, you still need the languaging to be able to put your arms around it and to know what it is that you need to do.
That's right.
Advice that you have for somebody that is thinking along this line of making a transition, what would be your number one advice?
Yeah, well, first to go is the transition. Do you want to work for others or do you work for yourself? That's a very different change, because if you want to work for others, then that means a job. Then you're basically going, I would find the best culture and leadership team to work with versus the job and even the money. People trade money for so much and they lose so much. Find the best team to work for. My dad said, in your 20s, it's not what you do, it's who you work for that's most important. And so I think that's true in life in general. So if you want to work for other people and make a change, go find the team that brings life and that there's collaboration, there's enjoyment. If you're working for yourself, the question, if you're going to make a change, it's basically, are you going to, do you want to make a change in bringing someone else in to run it? Or are you wanting to not retire, but move to this X life of diversified living? And, the advice is change is easy, transition's hard.
Got it. And we focus on the change. We don't focus on the transition generally. So great advice. Jeremie, our time is almost up. What have we not talked about that is really important for our audience to hear?
Well, everything I'm talking about, one of the benefits, Steve Cochran and I wrote the book, The Five Voices, and it's basically a simple way to understand people. It took Jungian typology, which is where Myers-Briggs came from, and we created a formula that's so much more simple. Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is that we've learned how to people whisper because we've learned how to know and understand who we're talking with. And we also know our own dynamics of ourselves so well. So I know I can predict my stress behavior. I can predict my behavior. And I predict it all the time. Like, oh, you're about to do this. Yep. Because I know myself very well. I also know people very well. So if you're listening and you're interested in any of this, but you'd also want to know and understand your personality of your kids, your spouse, yourself, then the Five Voices is a simpler, more scalable, sustainable system. And you can go find your voice for free. And I have a link that you can have for your show notes. But it's basically, it's giantcoach.com/mylegacy. So giantcoach.com/mylegacy. And what that does is that gives you the chance, if you want, to go and take your own assessment and figure out your voice and know yourself and understand. And that will help you with any transition that you're in. Just because if you don't know yourself, you can get in trouble.
It's true all the way through, isn't it? Every single step is know yourself. And the reality is we change. We change as we go through life. And I think we forget that sometimes. It's sort of like, oh, I know who I am, but that was when I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And
exactly.
And if we don't keep readjusting, we lose out quickly. Anything else that you would like to leave with our audience before we close?
Yeah. Well, just the encouragement to those who are listening to go, you have an opportunity to apprentice people, to get people to engage, but it's all based on your intentionality. I work really hard with my kids they're not compliant, they're engaged with me. I bring high support and high challenge, and I've apprenticed them. And we have some of the best relationships you can imagine. We build businesses together. We talk about things. We go on trips. And the same thing can be true with your team. To be someone that people want to work for, not have to work for. It really is you becoming really, really engaged with knowing who you are, knowing other people, and then learning how to light their pilot light. And if you get really good at it, it's a competitive advantage.
Learning how to light people's pilot light, it is huge. And once you get the hang of it, it is fun, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, Jeremie, thank you so much for being with us today on Building My Legacy podcast. And for those of you who are listening, we will have information about Jeremie and his books in the show notes. So please contact him, visit him, see what he's written. It's a great addition to what it is that you may be thinking and to your life and work. So thanks much, Jeremie, for being with us today.
Thanks, Lois, for all you do. Sure appreciate you.
You are so welcome. And for those of you who are listening, remember to visit our website, www.buildtomorrow.com. We look forward to talking to you again very soon. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.